9 Greek philosophers who shaped the world. Greek philosophers such as Socrates, Plato and Aristotle laid the foundations of Western thought, and the ideas of these ancient Greek philosophers still influence our understanding of the world today. The fundamental ideas laid down by great thinkers such as Socrates, Plato and Aristotle still influence our understanding of the world today. These brilliant scholars began using reason and logic to try to unravel the workings of the cosmos. They also explored the complexities of human morality. But who were these ancient Greek philosophers? And what were their key ideas? From pre-Socratics like Thales of Miletus to Plato and Aristotle, we'll discuss the famous thinkers who guided philosophy and science for thousands of years. We'll also explore the 3 main schools of Hellenistic philosophy and the founders who ruled philosophy after Alexander the Great. Here are the 9 most famous Greek philosophers who shaped the world for centuries. Number 1. Thales of Miletus, the first Greek philosopher. During the 7th century before Christ, philosophy dealt more with natural sciences than moral issues. One of the first Greek philosophers to focus on scientific thought was Thales of Miletus. Thales was born around 624 before Christ in the city of Miletus, in Asia Minor, and was part of the new wave of thinkers who tried to determine how the cosmos was built. This was the philosophical branch of metaphysics. Thales was a monist, which means that he considered a single element to be the main building block of the cosmos. Thales arrived at this hypothesis by considering what a cosmological building block would need to be. He determined that it had to be able to change and move. It had to be essential for life, and it had to be something from which all parts of the universe could be made. In his observations, Thales decided that water could fulfill all these criteria. Thales was one of the first thinkers who began to consider explanations of the natural world that did not depend on the gods. This early form of rational thinking made Thales one of the most influential Greek philosophers. He founded the Milesian school, and his successors ended up teaching students like Pythagoras. Number 2. Pythagoras, the father of mathematics. Pythagoras was part of the next wave of pre-Socratic Greek philosophers and is believed to have been born on the island of Samos in 570 before Christ. Pythagoras believed that mathematics offered a harmonious and rational way of explaining the workings of the cosmos. He hypothesized that everything in the universe was governed by the principles of mathematics and considered the discipline to be the fundamental model for philosophy. He discovered the complex relationships between numbers in the form of proportions and ratios, a line of thought that was reinforced by his observations of sound and harmonics. Pythagoras studied geometry and made several impressive discoveries that would influence architecture and mathematics for thousands of years. He was one of the first ancient Greek philosophers to use deductive reasoning to draw his conclusions, which represented a monumental change in the way thinkers formed theories. Pythagoras' methods influenced later Greek philosophers, such as Plato, and Pythagoras founded his own academy in Italy. This took the form of a commune, but may have been seen as a cult, as Pythagoras imposed strict rules on diet and behavior. The Pythagoreans attributed spiritual significance to numbers, and Pythagoras may have considered his philosophical revelations to be divine insights. Number 3. Protagoras, the relativist Greek philosopher. One of the first Greek philosophers to shift the focus from the natural world to human issues was Protagoras. Born in 490 before Christ, the year of Darius the Great's failed conquest of Greece, Protagoras became a legal advisor during Athens' Golden Age. He even became Pericles' advisor. Protagoras' experience as a lawyer taught him a fundamental principle: every argument has two sides, and both can be equally valid. This introduced the idea of subjectivity to the concept of belief. For Protagoras, it was the character of the person who held a belief that determined its value. To illustrate this, he coined the phrase, "Man is the measure of all things." Because he believed that everything was relative depending on your individual point of view, Protagoras considered absolute truth to be unattainable. This is because what one person may consider true, another will believe to be false. Protagoras also believed that this dichotomy was present in questions of good and evil. This is the founding principle of relativism and was perhaps the first time that an ancient Greek philosopher examined issues relating to human behavior and morality. Number 4. Socrates, the father of Western thought. Socrates is one of the most famous Greek philosophers in history, and his thirst for knowledge changed the course of philosophy forever. Socrates was born in 469 before Christ, and served in the Peloponnesian War. Socrates believed that knowledge was the supreme good and that pursuing knowledge was vital to living a good and virtuous life. Socrates argued that good and evil were absolute and that only through the pursuit of knowledge can we learn the difference. For Socrates, ignorance was the ultimate evil. Socrates developed the Socratic method, which involved taking someone's basic idea and asking a series of questions to expose any contradictions or flaws. Socrates hoped to examine everyday concepts that people took for granted, so that he could gain valuable information. This inductive examination didn't always go down well, and Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens. During his trial, Socrates accepted the guilty plea rather than embrace ignorance. He declared that, "the unexamined life is not worth living," before drinking the hemlock poison. Socrates' ideas have endured because his pupil, Plato, made Socrates the central character of his dialogues. Through these writings, the Socratic method survived to become the central principle of scientific reasoning for centuries. Number 5. Plato, the most famous ancient Greek philosopher. Alongside Socrates, Plato was a founding figure of Western thought. Born in 427 before Christ, Plato was a prolific writer. Through books such as the Republic and the Symposium and the founding of his academy, Plato's ideas have survived to influence generations of thinkers. Plato theorized that a transcendent world of ideas contained the perfect forms of every object on earth. When we see a table in our physical world, it is an imperfect copy of the form of a table. To illustrate this, Plato used the allegory of the cave. A group of humans are trapped in a cave. Behind them burns a fire that casts shadowy objects on the wall in front of them while hiding the true forms of the objects themselves. These illusions represent our fallible human senses, but Plato believed that our knowledge of the perfect forms was also innate to us. It was only through reason that we were able to uncover this true knowledge. Plato believed that this contrast between the ideal forms and our imperfect copies also applied to concepts such as goodness and justice. Plato suggested that using reason to reveal the perfect form of goodness, rather than our imperfect copy, was the ultimate goal of philosophy. Number 6. Aristotle, the Greek philosopher who taught Alexander. At the age of 17, Aristotle studied with Plato at the academy. After disagreeing with some of Plato's ideas, Aristotle left to found his own school, the Lyceum. He also tutored Alexander the Great and was one of the first ancient Greek philosophers to have his ideas translated into Arabic. Like Plato, Aristotle wanted to discover how we attain knowledge. However, Aristotle rejected Plato's theory of forms in favor of a more empirical approach. Aristotle believed that we gain knowledge from the evidence we observe in the world around us. Aristotle theorized that when we observe a dog, we notice the common characteristics it shares with other dogs. He also developed a form of logic called a syllogism, to analyze two or more ideas to generate a conclusion. He saw this as a product of humanity's innate ability to use reason, which separated us from other animals. Aristotle was also concerned with the purpose of things and how we could lead a good life. He argued that when we recognize our positive characteristics, we should use them to pursue virtue and reach our potential. According to Aristotle, this would bring us happiness and constitute a good life. Number 7. Epicurus, the seeker of tranquility. After the death of Alexander the Great, the focus of philosophy moved away from epistemology and metaphysics and concentrated on personal ethics. Philosophical schools sprang up all over the Hellenistic world. One of them was the Garden, founded by the Greek philosopher Epicurus. Epicurus saw pleasure as the ultimate example of good, while pain was the prime example of evil. Concepts such as justice and virtue come from pleasure. Epicurus believed that we should focus on maximizing pleasure in our lives while avoiding pain. The ultimate goal was to achieve tranquility, or what Epicurus called ataraxia. Epicurus' opponents denounced him as a hedonistic and immoral pleasure seeker. On the contrary, Epicurus considered friendship to be the highest form of pleasure. Epicurus' followers were not only students, but also friends, sharing a simple life of easily sustainable pleasures. Ethically, Epicurus believed that in order to live a pleasant life, one had to be honorable, just and wise. Epicurus saw the fear of death as the main opposition to a life of pleasure and tranquility. He argued that we don't need to fear death because there is no pain involved, either on a conscious or physical level. We simply cease to exist. Number 8. Diogenes, the Cynic. One of the most extreme ancient Greek philosophers was Diogenes, the founder of the Cynic school. Influenced by Socrates, Diogenes followed a life of virtue. However, his methods were very different from those of other philosophers. Diogenes believed that by rejecting material possessions and committing oneself to an ascetic life of poverty, one could free oneself from social and political expectations. He advocated living a life governed purely by natural impulses, without restrictive social conventions. For Diogenes, he has more who is content with less. Often ridiculed by other ancient Greek philosophers, the Cynics got their name from the Greek word kynikos, which translates as dog-like. In many ways, this was true. Diogenes argued that we should live according to our natural animal state and let ourselves be governed by the rhythms of nature. But being free from social conventions and expectations, Diogenes didn't care what others thought of his philosophy. Famously, Alexander the Great came to Diogenes and asked if there was anything he could do for him. The Cynic just looked at the young conqueror and asked him to stop blocking out the sunlight. Number 9, Zeno of Citium, first of the Greek Stoic philosophers. One of the most widespread schools of thought founded by the ancient Greek philosophers was Stoicism. This practical philosophy was first developed by Zeno of Citium. Zeno studied with Diogenes the Cynic, but disagreed with some of his mentor's more extreme ideas. So he set out on his own. The main principle of Stoicism is to accept what is not under your control. Zeno believed that by accepting what was not in our power, we could devote our attention to what we did have power over. He believed in a divine, logos, or lawgiver who presided over natural laws. Humans, Zeno argued, were given free will. By using our free will to accept what we cannot control, Zeno believed we could work to cultivate a life in accordance with nature. This refers to both living in harmony with the natural world and accepting our inherent human nature. In both cases, we must accept the good and bad aspects of life. Stoicism was developed by Greek philosophers such as Chrysippus, but really began to flourish during the Roman period. The famous philosopher-emperor, Marcus Aurelius, was a student of Stoicism along with writers such as Epictetus and Seneca. So, what did you think of today's video? Did you already know any of these ancient Greek philosophers? Which one impressed you the most? Let us know what you think about this subject, as we'd love to read and respond to your comments below. And if you liked this video and haven't subscribed to our channel yet, subscribe and click on the bell so you don't miss any of the intriguing videos we post every week. And if you want to enjoy and learn a little more, be sure to click on one of the videos we're suggesting. See you in the next video.